class problems. So
Middle class problems. It's true.
we'll jump in. So let's talk about middle and lower class problems now. And we're going to dive in real quick. And I want to just the income inequality thing. Paul Krugman here, very famous economist, has worked for, I forget which presidents he's worked for, but he's very famous. So here's an interview with him from a few years ago, and they're talking about it. And I just kind of want to go into this because he kind of nails the problem here. And
see that, and you can actually, I spent a little while just sort of going through the Forbes 400 list, and what you find is already it's an awful lot of inherited wealth in there. It's no longer a list of self-made men, and of the self-made men, a lot of them are pretty elderly, and those fortunes are going to be passed on to next generation. So the drift towards oligarchy is very visible, both casual observation and in the numbers.
I was taken with something you wrote the other day.
So I want to talk about that because that's the main issue. The whole point, behind the American dream was that anybody could make it. If you worked hard enough, you strove. That's not the case. You have to have money coming in to get there. So the American dream there, they're saying it's pretty much, it's dead. And the problem with that is that's what when this country was founded, that's what part of what we were fighting against. Ideally, we can argue about whether that's what was actually going on, but ideally it was this idea that we wouldn't have to live under oligarchs or an aristocracy anymore. But what's happened is the system's been around long enough that way that there's a whole new class of oligarchs and whatnot, and they're there because of money, not because of royalty.
To a degree, we've manufactured them.
Yeah.
We've created them.
Right.
Right.
Well, and we've allowed it to happen when we could have taken steps against it. So we're going to watch them talk a little bit more about that. But that's the main problem. And then there's a disparity of power that happens and a disparity of money. And that creates bigger economic problems. When you have too much money balanced at the top and those people have more of a say about where the money goes, of course, it's all going to tilt that way. And that's what's happened, especially over the last, 40, 50 years. But
all right, Duncan, let's pause for a second.
Sure.
I'm going to turn the volume up here on my end and see if that helps, because it felt like they were
a little quiet. Yeah. I've got the volume.
It might be just their recording that was quiet in general.
Yeah, the recording's a little quiet, but yeah, we'll go in back in.
Here we go.
That, in your opinion, the real problem is not capital accumulation per se, as much as it is, quote, remarkably high compensation and income. Now, how does that differ from what you were just saying about wealth that passes to the next generation?
So right now, high incomes are still primarily coming from people who made a lot of money, typically as corporate executives. That has been the story. So the big expansion of inequality in the United States since the 1970s has so far been driven by high salaries, high bonuses, and so on. That's where we are now. But our image of the top is really a quarter century old. It is about the way things were when these great fortunes were just getting started. We're just seeing the explosion of inequality. But we're well along the way towards one in which it is, in fact, an older thing, where people accumulate capital, pass it on to their heirs, and you get these dynastic wealth. So right now, and this is where Piketty has interesting things to say, but not this compelling vision about why America is so unequal right now. But looking forward, he's telling us that the story is already changing, and it's going to change more. So we are going to probably, unless something gets better, we're going to look back nostalgically on the early 21st century when you could still at least have the pretense that the wealthy actually earned their wealth. And by the year 2030, it'll all be inherited. And
so that's the problem. So part of it is income, and part of that income is controlled by, once, like you said, the booms in the 80s and 90s, and it was executives that were taking these huge bonuses and blah, blah, blah. But those guys were working their way up, essentially, right? Granted, a lot of it was pretty greedy how it was done, but that was how it was done. Now, this idea, like he said, now is a pretense that you can earn your wealth. It's not reality, right? It's more likely you're going to be in whatever class you're going to be in. And I'll show you an example of that in our next clip. But that's kind of the issue. But issues that could solve that are things that mitigate how much money a person can make, and tax things and things like that. And that's where we're going to go next here. But first, or in a minute here.